Hi everyone, this is Caleb from CP Homes. Will property prices keep rising? This is the burning question that a lot of my clients have been asking me. So let us look at the various factors and reasons why property prices will be rising and how the property prices will pan out in the near future. But before I proceed, do subscribe to my YouTube page because I have put a lot of effort into doing in-depth research and analysis, and your support will go a long way for me, and it really means a lot to me. Let's take a look at the various factors that will affect the property prices in Singapore and how it will pan out in the near future. So this is how the property prices have been performing over the past 15 years. And if you notice that we started off with our cooling measures in 2013, and that's when property prices actually went down, because it was the first time that people heard of drastic cooling measures such as our ABSD, our loan to value, our TDSR, so on and so forth. And after that, we had the avian flu crisis, and our property prices actually stagnated for quite some time. And if you notice that the HDB prices, which is demarcated in red, it actually stagnated from 2014 all the way to 2020, and because of the recent COVID, that's the reason why property prices went up. Whereas for private property prices, it actually went down, and after that in 2016, it rebounded and it never looked back. Along the way, we had also a few cooling measures such as the reduction in the SSD, so on and so forth, and also the TDSR and ABSD changes. And since 2009 to till now, we have more than 20 cooling measures. However, you notice that the property prices did not drop. Instead, it's on the general upward trend. Why is that so? The purpose of the cooling measures is not meant to cause the property market in Singapore to crash. The main aim of the cooling measures is to make sure that our property prices grow at a stable rate that is in tandem with our income growth. Can you imagine that if we do not have all these cooling measures in place, what will happen to the future generations? How are they going to afford a HDB flat or maybe a private property in the future? Will a HDB flat cost $2 million? How are our kids going to afford this? So now let's take a look at our next factor, the Singapore population. As of last year, June, our population stood at 6.04 million people, and at the projected weight, we are looking at 6.37 million people by June 2030. However, according to the population white paper, the government is aiming for a 6.9 million people to maintain the declining birth rate in Singapore. And in order for us to sustain this 6.9 million people population in Singapore, we need to have more houses for all these people. And when we have more and more foreigners coming into Singapore, what's the first thing that they will do? So I have a few clients who, from a foreigner, they became a PR, and the first thing that they told me is that, hey Caleb, I do not want to spend like 7K a month on rent, and I would rather put it into my mortgage. And the first thing that they did was to actually purchase a private property. So the thing is, when I also have clients who became a Singapore citizen from a PR, and the first thing that they did was to upgrade to a bigger unit because they did not have to pay ABSD. So the thing is, when more and more people become from foreigner become PR, and PR becomes Singapore citizen, naturally they will look to upgrade or to buy a private property so that they are able to live in it. And this is the reason why population increases, there's a higher demand for properties in Singapore. And this is how our property prices have been trending over the past 24 years in tandem with the population. And you notice back in 2000, when our population was just 4 million, our average property price was $652 per square foot. And right now in 2024, or last year 2024, the property prices was averaging at $1,960 per square foot. And in general, this is the upward trend. No doubt there are some bumps along the way, such as in 2007, when the property prices experienced a small dip. And then in 2013, the first cooling measures, or the first major cooling measures that was introduced into the market, that was when there was a slight dip. And then in 2019, when interest rate was high, and there was a slight dip. And if you notice that the high point gets higher and higher. What about the low point? The low point also gets higher and higher. So property prices has been on the upward trend, and no doubt along the way we see some bumps. However, in general, if you notice based on the past trend that our property prices have been increasing in the upwards direction. Next, for last year, the government actually collected 7.2% of the tax revenue from stamp duty alone, which equates to 5.8 billion. And 7.4% came from property tax, which was about 5.9 billion. So a staggering 11.7 billion came from real estate alone. This is a very substantial amount of tax revenue collected. So do you think as a government, will you let such a major source of tax revenue disappear because of the property market? So that's the reason why in general, the government will try their best to protect the real estate market in Singapore, because they cannot afford to let this major tax revenue source disappear. So this is how private property prices have been performing over the past few decades. In 2001, a 3-bedder, 1,000 square feet condo was averaging at about 600k, and in last year, it was about 2.4 mil. As for the resale market, in 2001, it was averaging about 576k, and in 2024, it was averaging at about 1.7 mil. So if you notice that we can never get back all this pricing back in 2001. And right now, property prices are at these prices now. And if you think that property prices will drop back to this price, that's when maybe Singapore will release no, okay? So next factor, okay, there are more and more HDB transactions that have happened for the past few years. So if you notice back in 2023, we have $469 million HDB transactions, and this number has spiked to more than double the amount in 2024, which is 1,035. So the thing is, as all these HDB owners cash out their profits, they have more liquidity, and they can put all this liquidity into their next housing down payment, which means that they can afford a higher property price quantum. So this is an article that was released by Straits Times recently, and that showed that there was an increase in HDB upgraders to private housing as of last year. So if you notice that the number actually went up from 5,060 all the way to 5,420. And also, with the increasing household incomes for each type of HDB household, you notice that in 2024 and 2023, for the HDB 1 to 2 room flat, there was an increase in the HDB household income, and then that applies for the 4-room HDB and also the 5-room and EA or executive flats. So together with the increasing household incomes for the various HDB types, and together with the profits that they have received from the sale of their, let's say, $1 million HDB flats, or maybe 800, 900k HDB flats, this makes them able to afford for the down payment of their next property. It can be a resale HDB, or it can be a resale private property, or a new private property, without even having to fork out any cash. So let's take a look at the case study at St. George Tower that is located in Kallang Whampoa. So in the September 2040 BTO launch, the 3-room was averaging at about between 328k to 388k. And in 2024, the average resale price was about 790k. So this is around almost double, or rather more than double, the price that they bought. And as for the 4-room, which was averaging about 459k to 574k, it was transacted at an average price of 1.044 mil. So this gives them about an average of 500k to 600k profit. So with all this profit, it makes all these HDB upgraders in staying in St. George Tower much easier for them to upgrade to their next property without having to fork out any cash. Same for Tampines Greenridge, where the average 3-room, 4-room, 5-room was averaging at this price. And then in 2024, which was last year, they transacted at around this price, which is around double or more than double the price of what they bought at. So this gives them more liquidity to pump into their next house, which makes upgrading to a private property much easier. And then we take a look at 2025, which is this year. This is a record low of 7,454 HDB flats that will reach the MOP. So as most of the people prefer newly MOP'd HDB flats due to better renovation, better condition. So with a lower number of HDB flats reaching its 5 years MOP this year, there will be a demand for all these HDB flats. But the thing is, it's lower than as of last year. So when we have more demand but less supply, in general, the prices will increase. And next, property speculation is an all-time low. Back in 1995 second quarter, property speculation was about 31.1%. And after that, in 2013, government introduced the cooling measures, and that was when speculation went down, property speculation actually went down. And in the first quarter of 2022, property speculation was an all-time low of 2.6%. So meaning that people are not using property to buy on the first day and sell on the second day. And there are a lot of all these cooling measures to make sure that people who buy property are looking for own stay or maybe some investment, but they are only allowed to hold on to one property. So with all these measures in place to make sure that only one Singaporean can hold a maximum of one property, otherwise you have to pay the ABSD, most Singaporeans will just get one property, and this causes the property speculation numbers to actually drop. So next thing, land cost. So land cost is one of the major reasons why property prices is on the rise. So let's take a look at a few examples. In this example, in this news that was released back in 2024 October, this Media Circle project was actually the land bid was actually being rejected because of the low bid price. Next, in Jurong Lake District, there were two bids that were put up, but both of them were being rejected because the bid were too low. So the next one is the Marina Gardens Crescent, where the URA actually rejected this plot of this bid, even though Goco Land was the only bidder for the plot of land, because they cited that the price was too low, the bid price was too low, and it was about 30% lower than this adjacent plot of land that was being awarded to Kingsford, which is also known as One Marina Gardens right now. So if you're interested in viewing this development, feel free to reach out to me and I will share more information about this development with you. So if you notice that, what is the government trying to do? The government is trying to protect our land costs in Singapore. If they were to award that land to the developers at a low price, developers has a lot of margin to play with. They are able to price the units at a very low price, which will rock the Singapore property market, and this is not what the government wants. Instead, they have this reserve price that all developers have to meet in order for them to be awarded that plot of land. And how is this reserve price being determined? It's actually being determined based on 85% of the estimated market value. So with this reserve price, the government is trying to make sure that the prices of the new developments are based on the market value of the land and the surrounding property prices. So let's take a look at the example. These three plots of land, if you are very familiar with Clementi Avenue 1. So we have these three plots of land, and the first plot of land was released in 2017, and that was known as Clement Canopy. The break-even price was 1,093, including all your marketing costs, all your labor costs, so on and so forth. And the average selling price on the launch day was about $1,330 to $1,360 per square foot. And then we have Clement, and which was launched in 2020. Break-even price was 1,401, and the average selling price was 1,640. And Alta, which was launched a couple of weeks ago, the break-even price was 2,156. You notice that the land cost has increased significantly. Labor costs, material costs, construction costs all have increased significantly. And the average selling price during the launch day was $2,537 per square foot. So within a period of less than 10 years, the prices has almost doubled from Clement Canopy to Alta. And this will be the trend moving forward because new developments will only get more and more expensive because developers cannot afford to be selling the units below their break-even price. If some of you have seen this recent news on this plot of land, the first private residential land in Bayshore, Singhai was the top bidder at $1,388 per square foot per plot ratio. And this translates to a $2,343 per square foot break even. So as Bayshore is situated in the OCR region, the expected selling price is between $2,700 to $2,800 per square foot. And can you imagine in the future, OCR is going to be selling at $2,700 to $2,800 per square foot. Back in 2022-2021, when Amo Residences was the first OCR project to be averaging above $2,000 per square foot in terms of selling price during the launch day, people thought that sell it's so crazy for an OCR project more than $2,000 per square foot, it won't sell. But the thing is, little did they know that Amo was more than 80% sold during the launch day, and right now it's 100% sold. And moving forward, if you notice that all the OCR launch prices are all about $2,000 and more than $2,000 per square foot today. So the thing is, moving forward, what is going to happen to our OCR prices if Bayshore is going to be setting a record price for OCR at 2007 to 2008? Will we even hit $3,000 per square foot for OCR in the future? That's pretty scary, right? So the thing is, do you think it's a good time for you to enter the market when property prices are still on the upward trend? So next thing is also demand versus supply. So if you notice that our average household size has been reducing because more and more families are branching out to start their own families, and it comprises of a couple with a kid. And from 1990 all the way to 2022, the average household size has been reduced from 5 to average of 3.09. An average of 20,000 new households have been formed annually over the past 5 years. So with more and more households breaking out to form their own family cluster, there is a demand for houses so that they can live in it. And also in 2024, we have 1.596 million residential dwellings. So based on the previous slide where I shared with you at our average household size is about 3.09 packs. So this means that we have residential dwellings is able to cater to 4.93 million residents. But remember earlier on when I shared with you that our current population is about 6.04 million people. So where are all these 1.1 million people living at? So even if half of them are foreign workers, where are the remaining 500k people living at? Do we have enough supply for all these people? Next, in the October 2024 BTO exercise, you noticed we saw that there were 35,000 applicants for 8,573 new flats. So the thing is, with such a high oversubscription, what happens to those people, the remaining 27,000 people who did not manage to get their BTO? So will they turn to a resale HDB? And this will actually cause the HDB prices to actually increase because of such demand for resale HDB, since all these people didn't manage to get their BTO units. A next thing to take note is that because of this GFA harmonization that was announced by URA, developers are not able to calculate the aircon latch, the wall thickness, and also the void space, especially for penthouse units. Cannot take all this into calculations. So with this, there's an estimated reduction in saleable floor area by 6 to 8% by the developers. So with this less saleable area, developers have no choice but to bump up their per square foot so that they are able to compensate for this reduction in saleable floor area. And this is why developers will only price their PSF as higher and higher because of this GFA harmonization. Next, we take a look at our strong affordability for Singapore households. So back in 2023, the 70th percentile is household is averaging about $15,900 for their household income, and then the top 10 percentile is averaging $32,900. And then in 2024, if you notice that there is an increase in the 70th percentile household income from $15,900 to $16,800, and then for the top 10 percentile has increased from $32,900 to $34,400. So this increase has led to more and more households being able to afford a higher property prices. So for the 70th percentile, you notice that their affordability has increased from 2.44 mil to 2.58 mil. And then for the top 10 percentile, their affordability has increased from 5.05 mil to 5.3 mil. So the thing is, a lot of my clients ask me, hey, if I were to buy a new development at 2.5 mil, who are going to be my future buyers? Can I sell in the future? So the thing is, if you notice that this increasing household income is the main reason why Singaporeans or Singapore households are able to afford a higher property prices. And 80% of the Singapore population stays in HDB and 20% stays in private properties. So if we take 20% of the income earners, of the household incomes earners, we notice that they are able to afford a 3.72 million property minimally, provided that they have the 25% down payment. So the thing is, this is the people who are going to buy over your private property if you are to sell at a higher price in the future. Next, interest rates. So this is how the interest rates have been performing over the past few years. You notice there are ups and downs, and during the low period in between 2009 all the way to 2017, property prices went up. And then interest rates went up, property prices slowed down a bit, but it did not crash. It slowed down a bit, and then during the COVID period, when interest rates were as low as 0.5% to about 1.5%, property prices actually spike up. And now, in the first 3 quarters of last year, the market was actually pretty quiet because of the high interest rates, but in the 4th quarter, it actually picked up because the Fed actually announced the reduction in interest rates, and that's why property prices actually shot up. So with the interest rates going down further, that's what the Fed has actually announced. Are we looking at an increased volume in the private property market? And are we looking at higher prices in the future? And this is how the interest rates will pan out in the next few quarters. And we are looking at a decrease in the interest rates in 2025 and maybe even in 2026 when the Fed has managed to press down the interest rates because of reduction in the inflation. So with the lower interest rates, it will actually help households to have a higher affordability. So back to the 70th percentile, you notice for the 70th percentile, the income of 16,800 with a reduce in the MAS stress test ratio from 4.8% to right now it's 4%, their affordability has increased by 230K. And for the top 10 percentile, which is about $34,400 household income, the affordability has increased from 4.82 mil to 5.3 mil. So that's a whooping close to 400K of increased affordability. So the thing is, with a lower interest rate, it will help to bump up our maximum housing loan, and this in turn will help to bump up our maximum affordability. And next, despite the increase in the ABSD from 30% to 60% for foreigners, we still do not see the property prices coming down. Why? It's because in 2024, 98.1% of the sale was actually made up by local people and the PR. And the foreigners made up 1.9% of the sale transaction. And this is a far cry from 2013 when 9.4% of the foreigners actually made up the sale transaction. Even after the reduction in the number of foreigners buying private properties in Singapore, The thing is, our property prices is still on the upward trend. Why? Because we have a very stable pool of buyers, which comprises of our local buyers and our PR. So with such a demand from our local pool of buyers, even if there is a reduction in the number of foreign buyers, it will provide us with a stable demand for our private property and our resale HDB market in Singapore. And this will actually help to support the prices moving forward. Next, government has very good intervention, unlike other countries like China, Hong Kong and New Zealand, where they do not have robust housing policies to protect the property prices. And that's the reason why they experience a property bubble. Singapore has robust cooling measures to make sure that our property prices grow at a slow and sustainable rate. So in the recent news that was announced by our Minister Desmond Lee, he said that the Singapore government is not adverse to more property cooling measures. Why? Because they do not want to have a property bubble in Singapore. And the government is very careful about intervening in the property market. Why? Because our homes and assets are at stake. So the thing is, they do not want the property prices to overcorrect. So with such a strong backing by our government, our Singapore government, it shows that they value our property prices in Singapore and they do not want the property prices to crash. And that's the reason why they introduce cooling measures. They have to ensure that the property prices grow in tandem with our salary and not too fast that our future generations are not able to afford the properties in Singapore. So in general, why aren't our property prices dropping? And why will it continue to rise? In general, no doubts, like what I've mentioned, that there'll be some bumps along the way. However, in general, the property prices will be on the upward trend. First, we have very robust cooling measures, TDSR, seller stamp duty, ABSD to prevent owners from having a second property. And then our income ceiling for BTOs, if you earn more than 14K, you have to go into the resale HDB market or maybe even go to an EC or buy a private property. And good profit margins from HDB owners, BTO or resale HDB upgraders. And moving on to private housing, it helps to support the private property prices and the EC prices. And like what I've mentioned just now, rising land costs set by the government and also material and labor costs result in higher selling price for new developments. Falling interest rates means increase in maximum housing loan, and this in turn increase the affordability for their next property. And also the GFA harmonization, which means that developers has 6 to 8% less sellable area and they have no choice but to bump up the per square foot. And lastly, once property prices increase, government will introduce new cooling measures to make sure that our property prices will slow down, not crash, but to slow down so that to ensure stable growth. So these are the reasons why property prices in general, in my opinion, will continue to increase. And I hope that you like the sharing session that I have shared with you. And if you find this information useful and you would like me to produce more useful content for your own knowledge, feel free to subscribe to my channel and also reach out to me via private message if you have any questions. And I look forward to seeing you in my next YouTube session. Thank you.